Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Nearly 1 million additional economic impact payments disbursed under the American Rescue Plan. Total payments reach nearly 165 million. IR 2021-107, May 12, 2021, Washington. Today, the Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and the Bureau of the Fiscal Service announced they are disbursing nearly 1 million payments in the 9th batch of economic impact payments for the American Rescue Plan. So if you haven't got your third EIP, your third economic impact payment, maybe the 9th batch is the one. This is the 9th batch. Let's see what we have included in it. Today's announcement brings the total disbursed so far to approximately 165 million payments, with a total value of approximately $388 billion since these payments began rolling out to Americans in batches as announced on March 12th. If you want to look at those announcements, we have a link to those here. The 9th batch of payments, that's the one we're on, number 9, EIP 3, number 9. The 9th batch of payments began processing Friday, May 7th, with an official payment date of May 12th, with some people receiving direct payments in their accounts earlier as provisional or pending deposits. Here's additional information on the 9th batch of payments. So here's the information. EIP 3, Economic Impact Payment 3, batch number 9. In total, this batch includes more than 960,000 payments with a value of more than $1.8 billion. More than 500,000 payments with a value of over $1 billion went to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue an economic impact payment, but who recently filed a tax return. So if you know someone in that situation, it looks like they're still picking up these people that they don't have the tax information for them, weren't able then to process the payment. The remedy for that is to file the tax return so that they can pick it up. Remember that the remedy for basically all 3 economic impact payments at this point is to file the 2020 tax return for the most part, although what you're going to do on the tax return will differ. For EIP 1 and 2, if you had not received those, if you're in a situation where the IRS does not have the information, you could file the tax return and actually calculate the EIP 1 and 2 payments in the form of a recovery rebate credit, which will actually be calculated on the tax return. EIP 3 will not be physically on the tax return, but the IRS, having known what the tax return dollar amount is and who to send the check to and whatnot, can then make the prepayment of EIP 3 based on the tax return. So it looks like they're still picking those up. They possibly still will be picking those up. So if you haven't filed or know anyone that hasn't got their EIP payments, then they may want to file the tax return. This batch also includes additional ongoing supplemental payments for people who earlier this year received payments based on their 2019 tax returns but are eligible for a new or larger payment based on their recently processed 2020 tax return. Now, there's probably still many people in this area because remember that this EIP went out and it was based on 2020 tax returns. It's a prepayment for 2021. We're talking EIP 3. Prepayment for the credit that would be on the 2021 tax return, which wouldn't be filed till 2022. They based the prepayment on 2020 taxes if they had it, but given the fact that it went out early in the year because the extension with the amount of time to file the 2020 taxes went in place, most likely they based it on 2019 for many people. But there's an AGI limitation, so it's quite possible that people had higher incomes in 2019 than in 2020, given the fact that that's when all the problems happened. So if they based it on 2019, they may have limited the amount of the credit, and the remedy for that would be to file the 2020 tax return. Again, with regards to EIP 3, you're not going to actually have anything on the 2020 tax return related to it, although you may for EIP 1 and 2, that would be the recovery rebate credit. But by filing the tax return for 2020, the IRS will then know what your income level was during that year, and they're going to automatically do what they call the quote plus up end quote payment. They should send you the difference if they didn't send you the full amount for the 2019. Same kind of adjustment could take place if you say had another dependent that came into existence, came into the world in 2020, and the IRS didn't know about it because they based it on 2019. Same kind of remedy, file the tax return for 2020. So this batch included more than 460,000 of these quote plus up end quote payments with a value of more than $800 million. In all, the IRS has made more than 6 million of these supplemental payments this year. Overall, this ninth batch of payments contains nearly 500,000 direct deposit payments with a total value of $946 million, with the remainder as paper payments. Additional information is available on the first 8 batches of economic impact payments from the American Rescue Plan, which processed weekly on, and there's links to these dates, April 30th, April 23rd, April 16th, April 9th, April 2nd, March 26th, March 19th, and March 12th. The IRS will continue to make economic impact payments on a weekly basis. Ongoing payments will be sent to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue a payment, but for who recently filed a tax return, as well as people who qualify for the quote plus up end quote payments. Special reminder for those who don't normally file a tax return. Although payments are automatic for most people, the IRS continues to urge people who don't normally file a tax return and haven't received an economic impact payment to file a 2020 tax return to get all the benefits they're entitled to under the law, including tax credits such as the 2020 Recovery Rebate Credit, the Child Tax Credit, the Earned Income Tax Credit. Notice that there's kind of an increase, of course, with some of the funding of these types of benefits, including possibly refundable credits and so on. There's 2 questions you want to keep in mind with regards to filing your tax return. 1, am I required to? You're not required to, generally, if your income is below a threshold so that you don't owe any taxes. The IRS is not going to come after you and take action, most likely, right, if your income is below a threshold and you don't owe money. But due to all these refundable type of credits and the possibility that you might have some refund in the way of withholdings that your W-2 employee took from you, your employer, you may still want to file. Many people, when they're asking, should I file, they stop at that point. They say, well, I'm not required to, I'm not going to file. But you still might benefit because you might get a refund. The next thing that people typically think is, well, I'm not going to file because all I did was a little bit of work and I only had a little bit of withholding. So even if my tax was 0, I'd only get a little bit of money back. But even that is not quite necessarily the case because there's all these refundable credits, which could include the child tax credit and it could include the earned income credit. And then you have the recovery rebate credit, and that's the economic impact payment impact if you have not yet received the economic impact payments. So and there's also free filing software that you can use to kind of look into this. So you might want to use the free file software if your income's below a certain threshold you have eligible to it to see if it's worthwhile to file the 2020 tax return. If it is, then you might want to go back in time and say, did I file 2019 and 2018? If I qualify for things like the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, and I didn't pick them up in prior years, maybe you should go back and do that. You might not have access to free software in prior years, but it might be worth paying for it at that point in time to get the software or to file the taxes by hand if you would like to go on that route. Also note, if you don't have the information because you no longer work at a certain place, you're like, I don't work there anymore, I don't want to talk to them or whatever, I don't have my W-2s, I don't have my 1099s, then you should go back to them to get that information, but the IRS has it as well, so you might be able to get transcripts from the IRS that will give you the information necessary basically to populate the tax return. Most of the basic information not only got sent to you by the employer, it got sent to the IRS, and if you file your account with the IRS website, you might be able to get enough access to fill out your tax returns. Okay, so file the 2020 tax return will also assist the IRS in determining whether someone is eligible for an advance payment of the 2021 child tax credit, which will begin to be disbursed in this summer. For example, some federal benefit recipients may need to file a 2020 tax return even if they don't usually file to provide information the IRS needs to send payments for a qualifying dependent. Eligible individuals in this group should file a 2020 tax return as quickly as possible to be considered for additional payments for their qualifying dependent. That's the other category that many people may have they may be missing, right? The IRS might have sent something out based on the fact that they know about the individual, such as they're receiving benefits for Social Security or something like that, but they don't have the dependent information. So if you have a dependent that you didn't get a payment for, then file the 2020 tax return. That's typically going to be the remedy here. That's the theme that we got going, and you might be able to pick up that extra amount. So people who don't normally file a tax return and don't receive federal benefits may qualify for these economic impact payments. This includes those experiencing homelessness, the rural poor, and others. Individuals who didn't get a first or second round economic impact payment or get less than the full amount may be eligible for the 2020 recovery rebate credit, but they'll need to file the 2020 tax return. See the special section on irs.gov claiming the 2020 recovery rebate credit if you aren't required to file a tax return. There's a link to that here. The tax return preparation is available for qualifying people. So you can take a look at tax return preparation options there, and you might be able to find some free options to file the tax return, or at least some help and assistance with doing so. And having some kind of software or asking someone for help and support, there might be free help and support to ask for, is highly recommended due to the fact that we have all these changes happening, and these changes that are happening to low and moderate income taxpayers are significant. Like these adjustments to the earned income tax credit, these advanced payments, the waiving of the unemployment, all these types of things are confusing because they're complicated in and of themselves. Some of them are prepayments, and they're new. They're things that are changing constantly. So the tax software itself is having problems, keeping on top of all this stuff. So it would be worthwhile normally to talk to someone and or use software to kind of help you to fill out the tax return and make sure that you're picking this stuff up, or do your best to pick everything up as best as possible. So the IRS reminds taxpayers that the income levels in the third round of economic impact payments have changed. This means that some people won't be eligible for the third payment even if they received a first or second economic impact payment or claimed a 2020 recovery rebate credit. Payments will begin to be reduced for individuals making $75,000 or above in adjusted gross income, $150,000 for married filing jointly. The payments end at $80,000 for individuals, $160,000 for married filing jointly. People with adjusted gross incomes above these levels are ineligible for the payment. So there's a lower threshold, a lower income cap for EIP 3 than there was for EIP 1 and EIP 2. Also note that means that if they base the EIP payment, EIP 3, on the 2019 tax return because you hadn't filed the 2020 tax return and your 2019 income was higher, it's more likely that you hit these caps for EIP 3. And if you file the 2020 tax return and your income was lower, it's likely that you might get that plus-up payment. That's where that plus-up payment comes into play. So individuals can check the Get My Payment tool. There's a link to that here on irs.gov to see the payment status of these payments. Additional information on economic impact payments is available on irs.gov. There's also a link to it here, and there'll be a link to this in the description.